Palms over Baghdad. Hulagu's expedition to oust the Caliph. In 1253, a breeze began to blow into Baghdad from the east. Unbeknownst to Al-Musta'sim, the Abbasid Caliph, the breeze would soon turn into a violent wind, also known as a shamal. This shamal was gaining energy from Karakorum, the Mongol capital, the most powerful empire on earth. For in the same year, Mongke Khan, the Great Khan, held a meeting with siblings and close family. It was during this meeting that Mongke expressed his desire to launch a dual military campaign, one led by Khubilai against the Sung Dynasty in China, and another against the Arabs and Persians led by Hulegu, grandson of Genghis Khan. Hulegu's mission was to conquer the Arabs and Persians and to expand further westward by subjugating Muslim nations, particularly bringing the Abbasid Caliphate under the Mongol yoke, and from there to proceed southwards through the Kingdom of Jerusalem to conquer the Mameluke Sultanate of Egypt. But there was another reason for Mongke's decision to bring the Muslim nations under Mongol control: riches and fear. Riches and fear. 36 years earlier, in 1217, the Mongols, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, invaded the Karakorum Empire, which ruled Persia at the time, and toppled it by 1221. However, the invasion of Persia was not complete. After Genghis Khan died in 1227, his son Ogode inherited the throne. To complete this, Ogode promoted Shor-Machin, if I'm pronouncing his name right, as the acting military governor of Persia with the sole mission to subjugate and control. Shor-Machin reigned as a military governor from 1231 to 1237 in Persia. Ogode would replace him with Baiju in 1237. Baiju was tasked with the same mission: control the territory and expand the borders, which he did by conquering the Seljuks of Asia Minor from 1242 to 1256. However, a Muslim delegation arrived at the court of Mongke in 1252, led by the religious leader, Quadi of Qazvin. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Please forgive me if I am not. Which requested Mongke to replace Baiju with a royal Mongol prince. Quote, "O illustrious and magnificent Khan, we do speak of a bridge made of stone or brick, nor a bridge of chains. I want a bridge of justice over the river. For where there is justice, the world is prosperous. He who comes over the river Amu Darai finds the Khan's justice. And on this side of the river there is justice and a path. On that side of the river the world is evil, and some people become prosperous through injustice." End quote. This message to the Great Khan made it clear that if the Persian people were citizens of the Mongol Empire, then they should act like it and be given a representative from Genghis's own bloodline. As to how bad the situation in Persia was under Mongol military governors, it is unclear, but leaves one to speculate that it was not good and enough to cause a delegation to travel to the Mongol capital of Karakorum to request a change in leadership. Mongke Khan could have turned them away, but he was no fool. The Mongols were long familiar with the influential Muslim merchants traversing throughout Asia. Besides the great flow of wealth, the Mongols also noticed the influential reputation of the renowned Persian scientists, astronomers, astrologers, mathematicians, technologists, painting, carpet making, music, and poetry, etc. This level of sophistication was too lucrative for the Mongols not to control, especially if they could conquer southern China and combine their commerce and intellectuals with that of the Muslim world. Therefore, it was imperative to make the citizens of Persia feel equal if the Mongols wished to enjoy the lucrative commercial and intellectual benefits. Thus, the formation of the Ilkhanate was established with Hulegu as its head. Besides riches, there was fear. Mongke feared a small group called the Assassins, who are a Shiite sect more properly known as the Nizari Ismailis. Mongke's paranoia, while reasonable, affected those who entered his court. William Rubruk, who traveled to the Mongol court in 1253 to 1255, describes the atmosphere prior his admission into the court. Quote, "This integration was being conducted because Mongke had been informed that 400 assassins in various disguises had made their way in with the aim of killing him." End quote. Now, as for preparation, excuse me, the Mongol contingents left Mongolia in the spring of 1253, before the conquest of the Middle East underway. Mongke and the Mongol princes threw a lavish party for Hulagu and showered him with gifts such as jewelry, money, fine horses, robes, for himself, his wives, and his sons. Mongke's biggest gift to his brother was issuing an order that 2 out of every 10 armed forces would join Hulagu's army. After the feasting was ended and the hangovers cured, the beginning of what was to become a grand army left on the 19th of October, 1253. Once on the move, the Mongol army lumbered through Central Asia and swelled into enormous force before coming to rest at the outskirts of Samarkand. While at Samarkand, Hulagu continued to increase the size of his forces. When Eastern Christian communities received news of Hulagu's planned campaign, the vassal kingdoms of Georgia and Armenia provided troops and were enthusiastic in recovering former Christian lands in Mesopotamia. Further to the north, Batu Khan, Mongol ruler and founder of the Golden Horde, division of the Mongol Empire, provided newly conscripted Tumans, an army unit of 10,000 soldiers, mostly Turks and Alans. Furthermore, Hulagu brought in 1,000 engineers from China, who had to get themselves ready to serve the catapults and to be able to cast inflammable substances. The total size of Hulagu's army was roughly between 100,000 and 150,000 men, probably closer to 120,000 in total. However, Hulagu probably gained additional forces along the way as he marched to Persia. To prepare the way for such a large military force, Hulagu dispatched advanced troops across Central Asia with the mission to sweep the path of livestock in order to ensure a good supply of pasture for his horses and pack animals when they passed through the area. Prior to pushing towards the objective, it was important to fatten the horses during the summer before moving out in winter. While the collection of troops and supplies keep coming in, Hulagu sent his vanguard ahead of the main force to negotiate and procure potential allies before his massive army passed through their territories. Once his armies pushed out, a vast army of non-combatants such as the Chinese engineering corps or the European craftsmen were tasked to pave the way by clearing the roads of obstacles, repair or building bridges, having boats ready for the rivers, and constructing catapults besides other devices of war. However, this was no ordinary traveling army, as you can see. In fact, the Mongol forces were a traveling city accompanied by their families. Whether Hulagu's army consisted of 120 or 150,000 men, each horseman would have extra horses for the journey. This would indicate that between 240,000 and 300,000 horses, if not more, accompanied the army, along with perhaps 1.8 million sheep. To ensure that overgrazing would not occur, the vast amount of horses and sheep were widely dispersed. Besides ensuring the accompanying animals got pastures to feed, the army and their families also needed food. While sheep is one source of food, Hulagu's agents were sent ahead, tasked to collect stores of flour, wine, and mare's milk, of course, fermented horse milk, etc. The big difference between Hulagu's army when compared to Genghis Khan's army is that Genghis Khan's forces, they moved a lot faster. They moved like a storm. It was not a traveling city, whereas Hulagu's army moved a few kilometers a day due to its sheer size and what they were bringing with them. Assassins. On the 1st of January 1256, Hulagu's army crossed the Amu River. When Hulagu crossed the Amu River, he was met with rejoicing, unlike what took place some 39 years earlier. As Hulagu's army passed through, he and his forces were greeted with great enthusiasm by chiefs and dignitaries. Quote, "They came willingly to his service a large number of princes and generals, people from every house by roads to praise him. At every halting place where they stopped, they received praise from those along the way." End quote. Before proceeding to the lands of the Abbasid Caliph, Hulegu had some business to conduct in the Elbruz Mountains, which are located in northern Iran. When the leader of the assassins, Adin, Ra'ukn Adin, if I'm pronouncing his name right, received news that Hulegu was coming for him, he quickly sent letters and, by a show of compliance, began to dismantle the castles by removing all battlements and towers. However, he took his time in doing so, which caused Hulegu to lose patience, and on the 8th of November 1256, the Mongols encircled his Maymundes castle. After 4 days of battle, the Mongols finally assembled their mangonels, a type of siege engine, and proceeded with bombarding his fortress until he surrendered later that month. Once in Mongol custody, Hulegu ordered him to tell the remaining fortresses to surrender and dismantle immediately. Not all surrendered, of course, which is expected. Many had to be taken by storm, and in doing so, every man, woman, and child met the fate of the sword. Muslims rejoicing over the destruction of the assassins quickly turned cold. Many seemed unaware that Hulegu now turned his attention toward the grand city of Baghdad, which served as the seat and power of Muslim faith. Letters to the Caliph. With the assassins a distant memory, Hulegu moved his forces to Tabriz in April 1257, and sent an emissary to the Caliph with a message. These messages are provided by Rashid al-Din. Quote, "When the heretics' fortresses were conquered, we sent emissaries to request assistance from you. In reply, you said that you were in submission, but you did not send troops. Now, a token of submission and allegiance is that you assist us with troops when we ride against foes. You have not done so, and you send excuses. No matter how ancient and grand your family may be, and no matter how fortunate your dynasty has been, is the brightness of the moon such that it can eclipse the brilliance of the sun? Talk of what the Mongol army has done to the world, and those in it from the time of Genghis Khan until today may have reached your hearing from common and elite, and you may have heard now, through God's strength, they have brought low dynasties, all of whom were families of might and majesty. Previously, we have given you advice, but now we say you should avoid our wrath and vengeance. Do not try to overreach yourselves or accomplish the impossible, for you will only succeed in harming yourself. The past year is over. Destroy your ramparts, fill in your moats, turn the kingdom over to your son, and come to us. If you command is obeyed, it will not be necessary for us to wreak vengeance, and you may retain your land, army, subjects. If you do not heed our advice and dispute with us, line up your soldiers and get ready for the field of battle, for we have our loins girded for battle with you and are standing at the ready. When I lead my troops in wrath against Baghdad, even if you hide in the sky or in the earth, I shall put your city and country to the torch. If you desire to have mercy on your ancient family's head, heed my advice. If you do not, let us see what God's will is. If you do not, let us see what God's will is." After listening to Hulegu's message, the Caliph replied, quote, "Young man, you have just come of age and have expectations of living forever. You have passed prosperously and auspiciously in dominating the whole world. You think your command is absolute. Since you are not going to get anything from me, why do you seek? You come with strategy, troops, and a lasso. But how are you going to capture a star? Does the prince not know from the east to the west, from the king to the beggar, from old to young, all who are God-fearing and God-worshipping are servants of this court and soldiers in my army? When I motion for all those who are dispersed to come together, I will deal first with Iran and then turn my attentions to Turan, and I will put everyone in his proper place. Of course, the face of the earth will be full of tumult, but I do not seek vengeance or to harm anyone. I do not desire that the tongues of my subjects should either congratulate or curse me because of the movement of armies, especially since I am of one heart and one tongue with Mongke and Hulegu. If, like me, you were to sow seeds of friendship, do you think you would have to deal with my moats and ramparts and all those of my servants? Adopt the path of friendship and go back to Central Asia." End quote. After hearing the Caliph's response, Hulegu sent back a wrathful reply stating, quote, "God the Eternal elevated Genghis Khan and his progeny and gave us the face of the earth, from east to west. Anyone whose heart and tongue are straight with us in submission retains his kingdom, property, women, children, and life. He who contemplates otherwise will not live to enjoy them." End quote. The fall of Baghdad. Hulegu sent messages to his commanders informing them to muster their forces to move on Baghdad. Baiju moved his forces from Rum via Mosul to cover the western side. Kedbuka advanced from Luristan, a province of western Iran in the Zagros Mountains. Contingents from the Golden Horde under the command of Batu's three nephews approached from Kurdistan from the north. Hulegu led the main force from Hulan, located in Kermanshah province in western Iran. In other words, the Mongol army was approaching the city in an arc from the north, which allowed them to converge from east to west. The Mongols, due to the use of pontoon boats, overcame the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which once served as natural barriers against invading armies. As the Mongols advanced down both banks of the Tigris, the Caliph sent 20,000 cavalry in an attempt to disperse and slow down the Mongol advance. Mongol scouts ahead of the main force found the Caliph's cavalry and reported. Not long after, the Mongol engineers took advantage of the situation by breaking the dikes of the dams along the Tigris, which flooded the terrain before the cavalry, drowning many of them as they attempted to flee back to the city. With the only threat between Baghdad and the Mongols' advance eliminated, Baju's forces marched down the west bank of the Tigris and took control of the commercial quarter, while Hulegu entered the Shiite suburbs to a rejoicing crowd beyond the eastern walls. Within 24 hours, the Mongols surrounded the city of Baghdad. On the 30th of January 1258, Hulegu gave the order to commence the bombardment of the city walls. However, there was the problem. The Mongol siege crews had no rocks. The siege trains carrying the needed stones were a 3 days' journey away. While the Mongols looked for suitable projectiles to throw at the city walls, Hulegu ordered his Mongol archers to fire arrows over the walls with messages attached, which informed the citizens that they would be treated with kindness if they surrendered. While Hulegu sought to end the siege peacefully, Mongol engineers, likely accompanied by a detachment of troops, came up empty-handed when it came to finding quality rocks. However, not all was lost. Mongol engineers stripped foundation stones from the buildings in the suburbs and uprooted palm trees to batter the walls of Baghdad. The Caliph quickly sent ambassadors to negotiate peace with Hulegu, would not hear the pleas, and detained them. Hugelu's message was clear. Surrender was not enough. It must be unconditional surrender. While the Caliph continued to send envoys to Hulegu, the Mongols bombarded the walls, particularly focusing on the Ajim Tower, which was reduced to rubble by the 1st of February. The Mongols finally broke into the city the next day and seized a portion of the eastern wall. However, the battle was far from over, and the negotiations continued for another 4 days. On the 6th of February, the bombardment ended, but the Mongols remained on the wall until the Caliph surrendered. Hulegu sent another message, this one to the armies of Baghdad. The message told them to lay down their arms and leave their posts. Seeing the situation was unwinnable by use of arms, Al-Din and Mujahid al-Din advised the Caliph to flee the city. But one man by the name of Ibn al-Qim proposed that the best way to end this was for the Caliph to go before Hulagu. Hulagu, he could marry her, or actually Hulagu's terms to the Caliph were simple. Hulagu desired that the Caliph turn over his daughter so that he could marry her, and that the Caliph recognize Hulagu as the supreme authority. If these terms were accepted, Hulagu would end the siege. The Caliph, Hulagu just ended the siege. The Caliph agreed, however, and his forces marched out, thinking they were going to retire to Syria. According to the 13th century Armenian historian Karakorum of Ganzak, quote, countless multitudes came through the city gates, climbing over each other to see who would reach him first. Hulagu divided up among the soldiers those who came out and ordered the soldiers to take them far away from the city and to kill them secretly so that others would not know. They killed all of them, end quote. The Caliph would also suffer the same fate. At Hulagu's order, according to the histories of Russia al-Din, quote, the executioner prepared for the killing and maliciously brought a sack. He bound the Caliph head, hand, and foot and put him in a sack, which became his habitation. He said, quote, see this descendant from stock that is unequal lead, and how the world has placed him in this sack, end quote. Quote, then they broke his head as though it were a stone, and he died quickly. Fate dealt with him in a grievous blow, and brought destruction on a beautiful king. When the renowned Al-Musta'sim was killed, a great name tumbled to the dust. End quote. Besides the Caliph and his sons being put to death, the 3,000 courtiers who accompanied the Caliph were also said to be put to the sword. The destruction of Baghdad. Karakorum of Ganzak, I'm going to get that right. Hulagu then, his account, quote, Hulagu then ordered the troops guarding the walls to descend and kill the inhabitants of the city, great and small. The Mongols, organized as though harvesting a field, and cut down countless numbers and multitudes of men, women, and children. For 40 days they did not stop. Then they grew weary and stopped killing. Their hands grew tired. They took others for sale. They destroyed mercilessly. However, Hulagu's wife, the senior Khatun lady named Dokuz Khatun, was a Christian. She spared the Christians of Baghdad, Nestorians and other denominations, and beseeched her husband not to kill them, and he spared them with their goods and property. Hulagu ordered all his soldiers to take the goods and property of the city. They all loaded up with gold, silver, precious stone, pearls, and costly garments, for it was an extremely rich city, unequaled on earth. Hulagu himself took his share of the Caliph's treasures, 3,000 camel loads, and there was no counting the horses, mules, and asses. Gregor of Akant's account, say Gregor's account, after this, they convened a great assembly of old and young horsemen, including the Georgian and Armenian cavalry, and with countless multitudes they moved on the city of Baghdad. When they arrived on the spot, they took at once the great and famous city of Baghdad, filled it with many people and rare treasures, and countless gold and silver. When they took it, they slaughtered mercilessly and made many prisoners. While various Christian communities were spared the sword, the Muslim population suffered greatly. After the massacre ended, the Mongols and their allies torched the palaces and mosques. The wagon loads of treasures plundered from the city were sent to Mongke Khan in Karakorum, or to Hulagu's fort on the island of Shalia in Lake Maya. End quote. The number of dead is unknown. Martin Sicker, in his book The Islamic World and Ascendancy, From the Arab Conquest to the Siege of Vienna, estimates that 90,000 died. Ian Fraser, in his article Annuals of History, Invaders Destroying Baghdad, published in the New Yorker, estimates, depending on the source, that, quote, 200,000 or 800,000 or more than 1 million, end quote, may have died. According to Andre Wink, in his book Al-Hind, The Making of Indo-Islamic World, Volume 2, that perhaps 50,000 troops, along with 200,000 to 800,000 civilians, died. Al-Hassan, in his book The Different Aspects of Islamic Culture, Science and Technology in Islam, Volume 4 edition, suggests that perhaps 2 million may have perished. Overall, a lot of people died. That's pretty much what they're all trying to say. The destruction of intellectual wealth. This is another one. The destruction of Baghdad was one of great disasters in human history. While one can elaborate on the great amount of wealth lost, one must not overlook the great amount of intellectual wealth lost, such as art, philosophy, and science, all put to the torch, along with the library, the learning centers, the hospitals, and so forth. But even more precious was the amount of life lost that had no part in the conflict. Some may ask how a group of people could do such a thing. The answer is not simple. But given what is known about the Mongols, they strongly despised farmers and cities. To them, farming was a waste, which is understandable. Mongols had no use for growing crops. They needed land for their horses and herds to graze. Cities were seen as centers of laziness. This is also understandable, for the Mongols were always on the move and had not the time for leisure, for their horses and herds needed constant attention. Life on the steppe had not the division of labor found in the city in order for it to function. Lastly, the Mongol record of sacking cities in China, Iran, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East always came with tremendous loss of life and shows their disregard for human life. They treated people as if they were nothing more than animals, herding them before the great army and preparing them for the slaughter as the army slowly encircles them for the grand kill. While despicable, it is understandable in how the Mongols, such as Genghis Khan, Hulegu, or even Tamerlane, treated civilians. Like that of Baghdad, for such men saw outsiders as nothing more than vermin, unless that person or group of people had something to offer that could provide the Mongol administration or military machine an advantage. When looking at the Mongols from afar, a quote from French historian René Grosset comes to mind when considering uncivilized and civilized. Quote, "It has been noted that Genghis Khan's Mongol invasion of the 13th century was less cruel, for the Mongols were mere barbarians who killed simply because for centuries this had been the instinctive behavior of nomad herdsmen towards sedentary farmers. To this ferocity, Tamerlane added a taste of religious murder. He killed from pity. He represents a synthesis probably unprecedented in history of Mongol barbarity and Muslim fanaticism, and symbolizes that advance from a primitive slaughter, which is murder, committed for the sake of an abstract ideology, as a duty and a sacred mission." End quote. The outcome of Hulegu's sacking of Baghdad was expected, especially coming from a man who grew up on the uncivilized steppe, while Turco-Mongol conqueror Tamerlane's later sacking of Baghdad in 1401 was not expected, especially coming from a man who grew up surrounded by civilization. If you like this little mini lecture, give me a thumbs up, leave your comments below, no fighting of course. I will leave references and links to those references in the description of the video. Until next time, see you around.